There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another Friday Reads. I'm filming this much later in the day on Friday than I usually do, but I have absolutely nothing to do for the rest of the day except to edit this sucker and get it up on Sean the Book Maniac. So, I'm good. It's just feels weird to be starting it so late in the day. I want to give a special shout-out, a hug in the form of a shout-out to my dear friend Adam, formerly of Memento Mori, who is going through a sad time right now. Adam's father passed away suddenly, and that's a tough way to see out a very challenging year. So Adam, sending you a big hug. I have had a really great reading week. I have 7 bales to tell you about. I'm just kidding! No bales. I finished 4 and started 4, so got lots to talk about. Of the 4 that I finished, the only one that I do plan to do a separate review of is this one, Cora Sandel's Alberta Alone, the 3rd in her Alberta trilogy. My comments on this will be brief. Translated from the Norwegian by Elizabeth Rokkan, who is just an amazing translator. Yeah, these editions don't give information about the original publication, but let's see. I have to go to the foreword. The first one, Alberta and Jacob, published in 1926 in her native Norwegian language. Alberta and Freedom, the 2nd volume, 1931. And then this, the 3rd and final volume, 1939. And then they didn't start to get translated into English until, I think, the 60s. This one was first published in 1965 in English. Anyway, that was quite a long preamble, but I loved it. I was thinking, as I got near the end, that maybe it wasn't going to hang together as much as the other 2, but then, boy, did it hang together, and it just really touched my heart, so I loved it so much. I am going to do a full review, but, you know, who's going to watch a review of Volume 3 of a trilogy unless you've read the first 2? So I'm not expecting high viewing numbers on that one. And my review is going to consist of reading a 2-page passage of the main character, her doppelganger, is that the right word? Because this is a very autobiographical trilogy, who struggling to keep the ember of her desire to write alive. And there's 2 pages that just took my breath away about that. So that will be the main thing that I'm going to do in my review. But Cora Sandel is one of my very most favorite writers, and this was a very satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. That I have a few other standalone novels and short story collections to read, but this has been one of the greatest reading experiences of my life, this trilogy. And the 3 books that I finished couldn't be more different. They reflect all the poles of my reading interests. So I also finished this chunkster of a biography of Queen Mary, consort of King George V, the current Queen's grandmother. This is the 3rd book I've read about Queen Mary, which shows you what kind of a queen I am. And it's definitely the best. I mean, none of you probably care. I know I can think of a couple of subscribers out there that would sit up, their ears would perk up when I say it's the best biography of Queen Mary, but far more of you will be interested. In other words, at least 7 of you will be interested to hear me say that it's the best royal biography that was ever written, certainly that I ever read. And I loved it. This was a buddy read with Leah, and we just queened out and voxered the crap out of this book. So I'm not going to do a full review in my Friday reads, but I would say the most fascinating fact that I learned from this book was that, of course, being a royal princess, coming of age in the late 19th century and becoming queen in 1910, she was very conservative. And so when the suffragette movement started, her husband, the king, was watching the Royal Ascot, is that what it is? Horse races, when one famous suffragette jumped in front of one of the horses and was killed, and she did that. It was an intentional suicide to draw attention to suffragette issues, and the king saw that, was horrified and angry at the suffragettes for making him watch this. So not a progressive family. And during the outbreak of World War I, Queen Mary, who, like her mother and with her mother in the late 19th century, did all kinds of charity work. And I mean, there's lots of valid critiques of charity, but she came from a family that really, a branch of the royal family that really cared about charity work. And she got to work in during the outbreak of the war to support women working. And she partnered with a suffragette. That suffragette is not somebody that I knew. Her name was not familiar to me. What was it? Mary MacArthur. And they worked together. It wasn't just them two, but they worked very closely together, and they didn't trust each other at first, and they couldn't have come from more opposite ends of the social spectrum. And they made that happen. A program across the UK that, and I don't remember the details, that it was not just a token thing. It made a big difference in a lot of women's lives during the First World War. And that just is one example of the many things that complexified my understanding of who Queen Mary was. She is usually portrayed as just kind of dull, and in many ways her public persona was, but this biography gets underneath all that, and she was a complex person. That delighted me. So that's something I will never forget. I won't say any more. I loved it. If you're going to read one royal biography, people, it should be James Pope Hennessy's Queen Mary. It was originally published in 1960 or 1961. And then some of you might remember that his notes that were kind of memorandum style summaries of his meetings with various members of the royal family as he was doing the research was recently published 2 years ago, The Quest for Queen Mary, and that's where all the dirt is. The dirt didn't make it into here, so if you want to find out who was gay and what the scandals were, there's some scandals in here, but the other book was an absolute delight. Anything James Pope Hennessy writes. So if you don't want to read about anybody royal, people, he has also written, well, he's been dead for years, he was murdered. I think it was some gay bashing attack, I've forgotten. Pope Hennessy wrote Anthony Trollope, a book, a biography, and a book about Provence. And I don't know what the other books are about, but he's one of the most beautiful prose writers that I have read, fiction or non. So that's my little rave about James Pope Hennessy and Queen Mary. Now, I said the books that I read finished this week couldn't be more different. I don't know how to talk about this book, so I'm not really going to try. I'm just going to kind of fumble around and say a few things that hopefully won't put you off of reading it. This is a book that isn't for everyone because it's maybe the heaviest book that I have ever read. It's a Holocaust documentary novel, Trieste, by Dasha Drndic, transferred from the Croatian by Ellen Elias Bursak. And I read it over about 4 or 5 months because it's not something that I could read very much in one sitting. It's really heavy. What a fascinating work of art. The fictional story is about a woman named Haya, who in the early days of the 21st century is July 3rd, 2006. She is in a room alone waiting for someone to come and meet her. And we don't know, and we don't really find out until the last 60 pages or so of the book, who she is waiting for. And she is a fictional character. And as far as I have understood it, I haven't done a lot of background research since I finished reading it, but I'm pretty sure that the person that is coming to meet her, that she is waiting and has been waiting since World War II, she's been waiting for this to see this person, is a fictional creation. But that fictional story, and I'm not going to say anything about any more to do with that, was grafted onto the true facts of the Holocaust. So much of the story is set in Trieste. Trieste is also hard to talk about. Trieste is a city that has gone back and forth between about 3 different countries. It is now an Italian city, but in recent history, it was part of the Habsburg Empire until 1918. In fact, it was the 4th largest city of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and it was the site of a lot of battles during World War II. But it's a maritime gateway for northern Italy, Germany, Austria, and Central Europe. So it's a very important place historically, politically, culturally. And she sets her story here and grounds that fictional story in the context of the Holocaust of World War II and the Holocaust. And all of that detail, which forms 95% of this book, is true and really, really tough to read. I don't remember being so disturbed by a Holocaust-themed anything since I watched Schindler's List. There was parts of Schindler's List where I remember when I was in the theater, I didn't know if I could finish watching it, and I did, and I'm glad I did. But I can usually handle any kind of violence if it's true in history or something, like it's not a horror movie or something. I'm okay, but this really was tough going in places, and I am saying that not as a bad thing, although it is a bit of a trigger warning, I guess. I just thought it was a work of dark beauty. It's indescribably important, and holy fuck. Somebody asked me the other day, do you ever swear in your videos? I said, oh, for fuck's sake. So yeah, this is a holy fuck book. It would be facetious of me to say that I can't wait to read another book by Dasha Derndich. That wouldn't be true, but I do very much want to. But I know what I'd be getting myself into. What an incredible work of literature. And the only disappointment among the books I finished this week is this collection of letters that Denton Welch, one of my favorite writers, wrote to his boyfriend. Good night, beloved comrade. The Letters of Denton Welch to Eric Oliver, edited by Daniel J. Murtaugh. Let me put it down for a minute. I don't know why my arm is so tired. It's not a very heavy book, Sean, for Christ's sake. But I just put up a Zoom chat video the other day with Roz of Scally Dandling about the books, talking about mid-20th century British women writers. And at the end of that video, Roz said she doesn't like to read writers' memoirs if she really likes the novels or whatever that writer has written, because maybe learning more about the personality or life of the writer would turn her off of their writings. And I thought about that as I started to sour on this collection. I did finish it, but I was basically not enjoying it for the last half. But it didn't turn me off Denton Welch. I wouldn't want to be judged by the kind of communications and insecurities that I had in the early days of my relationship with Kenji, and that's really what this is. This chronicles a one-sided conversation because the letters that Eric wrote back to Denton Welch did not survive. A one-sided conversation in the early days of the relationship, and they were not really that compatible, and they were often arguing and fighting and really stupid high school stuff. But they did move past that, at which point there's no letters, because I think they were living together. So it's just really almost embarrassing to read this. I don't know, there was no literary merit to the letters. It didn't give a full-bodied portrait of Denton Welch. And the book, it should have been my first clue. The book there's 120 pages of letters and about 90 pages of footnotes. And the footnotes were actually more interesting in a way because they would fill in the context. But if you have to fill in that much context to explain the references in the letters, I'm just not sure this book ever needed to be printed. I don't think it adds much of anything. So I wish I hadn't read it, actually. I mean, it has not tainted I'm not going to have it in the back of my mind when I read my next Denton Welch novel, but this was kind of silly. Kind of a waste of time, I thought. So that happened. So those are the books that I finished. And I finished 4 and I started 4. Talk about symmetry. I hope to finish a couple more, so there's one or two that I think maybe only one that I told you I was going to start this week in my Friday reads last week that I haven't gotten to. Chupa Lahiri's the namesake, but I will be starting that today or tomorrow. That buddy read with Juan of Bookish Islander doesn't kick in until our first check-in is maybe next Wednesday, so I'm doing fine. But I have started 4, and they're all starting off really good. I'm absolutely delighted by Rosamund Lehman's The Echoing Grove. I don't know where this fits into her oeuvre. I don't remember that Roz in our chat talked about where it fit in. But anyway, let's find out. Oh, it's quite late. It's her 9th novel. So no wonder it's so good. Published 1953. I love this so much. How many pages have I read? 40. So it's early days, but it's so engrossing. It's about, and I'm not going to tell you, even though this is one of the central premises of the novel, is it referred to on the back? No. But two adult sisters have been estranged for, I don't know how many years, but many years. And this novel opens with them meeting with the one sister, Dinah, arriving at her sister Madeline's place for their first visit. Dinah's actually staying with her sister during this visit, but it's been years since they've been in touch. And there was a huge falling out years ago. And the reason for that falling out is very dramatic, and you're certainly not going to hear the details on that from me, but oh my God, it's really rich. I love the writing. There is a incident the first day. Madeline is a widow. Dinah, I don't think we really know what her situation yet, but they go for a walk that evening, and they walk into a churchyard. Oh, Dinah brings her dog, and I realized recently I kind of like pets. I kind of like dogs in books. I don't really care for them in real life. When a writer can write about a dog really well, I'm impressed. And also children. Yeah, children are much more enjoyable in fiction than in real life. Did I say that out loud? So they go walk the dog, and they're in a churchyard, and the dog... No, it wasn't a churchyard. It was next door to the graveyard. That's what it was. And the dog sees a rat, and all hell breaks loose, and it's very dramatic, and I'm assuming heavily symbolic, but it was just like 5 or 7 or 8 pages of just this incredible scene that was a tour de force, and very unusual scene early in a novel that I will never forget. So it's starting out really good. I am delighted by it. More later. Tomorrow is my first check-in with Mark Nash of this Scottish novel set in Ireland, For the Good Times by David Keenan. David Keenan is thank you for all the clarifications. People left comments on my Friday reads from last week. David Keenan is a Scottish writer, but this is a story set in North Belfast, and many of the main characters end up on the wing of the prison as IRA members where the hunger strikes. Remember, when were they? Late 1970s? And so it's their story. We see them in prison, and then we're going right back to that neighborhood. That neighborhood is Ardoyne, an impoverished, predominantly Catholic area of North Belfast, to their early days and involvement in the IRA there. The protagonist, Sammy, has a wonderful voice, and I can't believe how funny this story is because, it's chronicling terrorist acts that they are carrying out and such, so it's very disturbing, and this guy is so freaking hilarious. I'm really enjoying it. I don't know where it's going or what I'm going to think by the end, but I am just mesmerized by the first-person voice. It's reminded me of, I don't know how far I would go with this, but it's immediately reminded me of Dennis Johnson's collection of short stories, Jesus' Son, which is one of the most amazing short story collections that I've ever read. And the voice of those stories is very much like this Sammy's voice here. I have read 24 pages, and I have about 40 pages left to read before I check in tomorrow, but it's really easy to read. A lot of the stories are really disturbing, but it's just disturbing and delightful in equal measure. I hope it continues to be that way, because I really didn't know what I was going to be getting myself into, but I am really enjoying it. These last two I have got really only bare starts on. And one is this novel from what is now Zimbabwe. When it was published, it was still Rhodesia. Waiting for the Rain by Charles Mungoshi. This is a book that I picked up secondhand somewhere along the way here in Tokyo many years ago, and just thought, why I gotta read this sucker. It's been on my shelf too long. And am I ever glad that I did, because I'm really enjoying it so far. It was originally published as part of the Heinemann African Writers Series, 1975. Yeah, Zimbabwe came into being about 78, 79, didn't it? I'm really enjoying, I've read maybe 4 chapters. They're very short chapters. And the chapter that captured my heart is, it's set in a very traditional African village. I don't know when it's set. I don't think it's set in the 1970s. It's probably set 50 or 100 years before that, but I don't know. The old man, it opens with a dream, and I was really disoriented by that dream because that went on for a couple pages. In fact, the whole first chapter is his dream. And I was what is this? Surreal. But chapter 2, the old man wakes up and it's like very early. It was like 5 a.m. or something. And everybody in the family has their own hut. And so he's milling around the camp. I don't know if that's the right word. And his wife's got her hut. And then his daughter-in-law's mother, Old Man Disa, has her own hut. The thing that just captured my heart is the old man, so far I think he's only referred to as the old man that's woken up so early in the morning, has a chat with Old Man Disa, his daughter-in-law's elderly mother, who herself is has vision and hearing problems. And so they're shouting at each other, and the repartee between them was absolutely delightful. And he is thinking that all these years, he wished that he'd married her and not his wife. And that chapter just filled me with joy. So I've only read a couple of chapters. It seems like it's going to be a family story about this extended family, and starting out really good. This is the book that I bailed on New Year's Eve 2017. The Looking Glass Sisters by Goril Gabrielsen, translated from the Norwegian by John Irons. I've just read the first 25 pages or so this morning, so just barely getting into it. I've remembered quite a bit of what I've now reread, but I had forgotten quite a bit of it too, so far it's really good. I mean, it's a very sad story. It opens with a middle-aged woman who's quite severely disabled, paralyzed. Her sister and her sister's new husband, again a very middle-aged, if almost elderly, married couple. They have kicked her out of her bedroom downstairs, and they have put her in this old room in the attic, and they're not actually taking care of her enough. And I don't remember why, and I haven't discovered why, but I mean, it's basically abuse. And she's kind of remembering her life. She got some kind of illness when she was about 4 years old, where her legs started to go numb, and her elderly parents didn't know what to do, and they didn't do anything soon enough. And when they finally, because this is all happening in the boonies of Norway, and when they finally got her to the hospital, she was in the hospital for months and months and months and never regained the use of her legs. And her sister has been taking care of her for many, many years, and they are very quarrelsome siblings. And then the sister married a neighbor, and things didn't go well. So it's a very sad story, and very abusive people in it. She herself, I remember now, was not a very nice person. It's hard not to think about Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. But you are, Blanche, you are in that wheelchair. I mean, it's that level of really abusive dysfunction. So it's not boring. I'll keep going with it. I got up to page 76 last time. I'm not holding out for a happy ending to this one. So those are what I've started. I will finish probably at least 2 more books in the coming week. And so here are the next 2 books that I will be starting. Both of them will be on Scribd. My cousin Lindsay and I are going to be doing the first buddy read we've done in many a year. We were browsing in the bookstore together about a month ago, and we noticed this book. Neither of us bought it, but we both were interested in it, and it's on Scribd, so we're going to read it there. And I was 0 minutes old. Was that? I'm probably not cool enough or young enough to have used that expression correctly, but I just found out, let's say it like a normal non-millennial, that the author is a woman. I thought it was a man. The novel is Long Live the Posthorn, a Norwegian novel by Vigdis Hjorth. Did I get that right? That's a difficult word to pronounce.
Vigdis Hjorth.
Vigdis Hjorth. And I thought it was a man. Translated from the Norwegian by Charlotte Barsland. Has a lovely cover, and what is it about? It's about a strange and transformative 6-month period in a young middle-aged woman's life. That's enough information. There was far more information in the summary than I wanted to know, although I am going to read the synopses of novels before I start reading them, but it's one of my pet peeves, and if you do this, I still love you, but I turn the volume down or fast forward when people read the back synopsis of books. What a book is about is not interesting, but there are triggers for me, things like magical realism or whatever that I want to avoid, so that's why I'm going to, even though I don't like knowing the information that's on the synopsis, just to avoid spending money. This one's free on script, but I mean, to avoid spending money on books, this one seems okay. Eleanor is 35 years old. She's kind of feeling lost in her life. She reads an old diary and doesn't recognize herself, and then a co-worker disappears. So I hope it's not too mystery-y, but we'll give it a try. And that's going to be a buddy read with my cousin Lindsay. And if the stars align, we'll make a video discussing that. And of course, I will be starting the Jhumpa Lahiri. But then the other one that so I guess I'm now assuming that I'm going to finish 3 books in the coming week, and I think that's quite possible. I like to have my Decembers kind of free of buddy reads, and how many buddy reads have I mentioned so far in this Friday Reads, but it's certainly far fewer than usual. And just focus on books that have not fit into readathons or buddy reads or anything, and that just I want to get to them. And here is one of those that has been a book that I have wanted to get to since I can't remember when. It was on my radar even before I heard Britta talk about it on her channel, and I remember Britta raving about it back in the days before we really knew each other. That's how long ago. And it is an American novel, Work Like Any Other by Virginia Reeves. And so it went higher on my radar, closer on my radar. I don't know how to... No, let's separate the metaphors. It went higher on my list, but still many years have passed. So damn it, I'm going to get to it in December 2020. I think it was originally published 4 years ago. Set in 1920s rural Alabama, about a prideful electrician. Looks like a family historical drama, and I hope I like it because I've heard nothing but good about it. So I hope to start that in the coming week. I think I'm done. Thanks for watching.